The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us on Business Brief. U.S. President Donald Trump's push for sweeping tariffs is creating great uncertainty and denting confidence, but it is not likely to trigger a near-term recession. International Monetary Fund Managing Director Georgieva said on Monday the group is not seeing a dramatic impact yet from the tariffs implemented and threatened so far by Trump since his return to the White House. IMF will likely slightly lower the economic outlook in its next World Economic Outlook update in about 3 weeks.
We don't see recession on the horizon. We don't see stagflation on the horizon. But I want to send this cautionary note. What we do worry about is the absorptive capacity of economies to any further shocks. When I became managing director just before COVID, countries had fiscal space, abundant, many of them. They had monetary policy space. All of this is gone. What do they have? Majority of the countries have high level of debt. So if we tamper with the process of disinflation, if it stalls any further, if inflation expectations get somewhat de-anchored, then interest rates will stay where they are. God forbids any movement upward. And that at the time when countries need to refinance, many of them, they need to refinance their debt under higher interest rate conditions. Yes, financial conditions remain accommodative now. Will they stay that way is to be seen. So what is the moral of the story? It is twofold. One, the sooner there is more clarity, the better, because uncertainty, our research shows, the longer it goes, the more it may negatively impact growth. And two, for countries that have been kind of playing with the idea of structural reforms, more pro-growth reforms, but have been slow to implement, slow no more. Focus on getting your economy in good place.
Well, Asian equities rose on Tuesday following Wall Street's overnight gains, while gold hit an all-time peak and Treasury yields fell as markets awaited details of U.S. President Trump's reciprocal tariffs. Regional stocks found some respite on the first day of April after being battered in March by worries that Trump's trade war could trigger stagflation or even a U.S. recession. Bloomberg reports investors are nervously awaiting April 2, a day Trump has dubbed Liberation Day, when he has promised to unveil a massive reciprocal tariff plan. Asia's factory activity mostly weakened in March as an intensifying U.S. tariff war and slowing global demand hurt business sentiment. Private sector survey showed on Tuesday it darkened the outlook for the region's economy. China was one outlier among a broadly downbeat set of purchasing managers' indices, following or showing activity in the world's second largest economy picking up as factories rushed to get goods to customers before U.S. tariffs took effect.
Sentiment on the global markets is relatively weak this morning. We're seeing around -4% on the Japanese stock market. The DAX is also opening slightly weaker here, down 1%, so not quite as weak as the Japanese stock markets. This is due to concerns about Donald Trump and his statements on Air Force One announcing another large tariff package for Wednesday. Reciprocal tariffs will be imposed on all countries, and this has clearly unsettled the markets this morning. Next Wednesday could have a major impact on the global stock markets. Quite a few stock market analysts are talking about the fact that it could be the end of the liberal world trade. Nevertheless, we will see what is to be expected.
Well, Japan will continue to push strongly for the United States to exempt the country from auto tariffs. Under pressure to counter economic headwinds from U.S. tariffs and protect households from rising living costs, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said on Tuesday Tokyo will examine the impact of the U.S. tariffs on domestic industry and employment and take all necessary measures. Ishiba also pledged to make effective use of the $770 billion budget for the fiscal year 2025 to tackle inflation after it was approved by the Japanese parliament on Monday.
先月公表されました
Regarding the additional tariff measures announced last month by the U.S. on automobiles and other products, as Japan is the largest investor in the U.S., we will continue to push strongly for the U.S. to exempt our country from the tariffs. The government will negotiate with the ruling coalition at an early date specific measures we can take to respond to the additional tariffs imposed by the U.S. We will make effective use of the fiscal 2025 budget that was approved yesterday and will face the livelihood of the people of Japan sincerely and respond flexibly to socio-economic trends, including prices, in a seamless manner.
Meanwhile, Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC plans to continue to grow in Taiwan during a ceremony to mark a factory expansion, following concerns that its investment in the U.S. will dilute its presence at home. The firm said it is expanding its recently built domestic fab plant, which would add about 7,000 tech jobs to the island's economy. The factory produces TSMC's most advanced chips, employing 2 nanometer technology. And the ceremony comes in the same month the company announced a $100 billion investment plan in the United States.
When there is a good company, the government will support, collaborate with and encourage it expand to around the world. But its most important foundation will remain in Taiwan. That's why I say that a good baseball player is like the TSMC company, able to play in the Major League Baseball in the U.S., but when they return to Taiwan, they are our national team.
The
2 nanometers wafers production will begin as planned in the second half of the year. It will be including supercomputers, mobile gadgets and cloud. The successful expansion of 2 nanometers project shows TSMC's effort to develop advanced manufacturing and increase output in Taiwan.
As a key manufacturing partner to NVIDIA, Apple, and Qualcomm, TSMC is central to the U.S. chip industry, and bringing more of its production to U.S. soil would solve a major supply chain risk for those firms. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump says he wants to see Russian President Vladimir Putin follow through and make a deal to end the war in Ukraine. Speaking to reporters inside the Oval Office on Monday, Trump said he doesn't want to move forward with secondary tariffs he previously threatened to impose on buyers of Russian oil if it can be avoided.
I want to see him make a deal so that we stop Russian soldiers and Ukrainian soldiers and other people from being killed. But mostly it's Russian and Ukrainian soldiers. They're losing at least 2,500 human beings, beautiful human beings, a week. And I want it to stop.
The uncertainty around sanctions and energy flows continues to rattle global markets with potential ripple effects on oil importing countries like the Philippines and growing pressure on energy-intensive industries worldwide. We have to pause for a few reminders, but the biggest business stories from around the country and the market's closing data are up next. Keep it here on Business Brief, only on the Bilyonaryo News channel. Welcome back to Business Brief. The Bureau of Treasury saw a rise in the country's debt in February, but the peso's strength is helping absorb foreign debt gains. We have Soo-Jin Kim on the line to give us the details. Soo-Jin, go ahead.
Yesterday, national government debt hit 16.63 trillion pesos in February, according to the Bureau of Treasury. The numbers rose by close to 320 billion pesos, which is almost a 2% increase from January's figures, driven by new domestic and external borrowing. However, the peso's strength against the dollar helped offset foreign debt gains. On the other hand, domestic debt is now at 11.22 trillion, up by close to 140 billion pesos due to the net issuance of government securities. Still, the peso's appreciation trimmed 1.10 billion pesos from this valuation. Meanwhile, external debt jumped nearing 180 billion pesos on new foreign loans and currency adjustments, reaching 5.41 trillion pesos. The peso gains actually cut dollar-denominated debt by 34.48 billion pesos. Also, guaranteed debt is down to over 340 billion pesos, falling by 5.16 billion due to repayments and peso appreciation. Overall, the Bureau says national government debt remains manageable, even saying that the uptick reflects a measured increase. And those are the latest updates for now. Back to you, Raine.
Sujin Kang. As Asian leaders call for stronger regional cooperation amid global uncertainty, the Philippines enters the second quarter of 2025 with growing business confidence. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' latest business expectation survey shows the confidence index rising to 45.4%, up from 40.3% in the previous quarter. Press Secretary Claire Castro describes the rise as a positive signal, reflecting strengthening trust in the government's economic policies. She adds that the momentum could fuel fresh investments and business activity as the country kicks off a new quarter on strong footing. With inflation easing, rates holding steady, and investor sentiment improving, the outlook for Q2 starts on a firmer, more confident note. Indigenous peoples remain the poorest sector in the Philippines in 2023. That's despite improvements in the country's overall poverty rate. Latest data from the Philippine Statistics Authority shows 32.4% of indigenous people still live below the poverty threshold, making them the most economically vulnerable group. They're followed by fishermen with a poverty incidence of 27.4% and farmers at 27%. This even as the national poverty rate dropped by 2.6 percentage points from 2021 to 2023. The figures highlight the need for more targeted inclusive growth policies, particularly for rural and marginalized communities, if the country would achieve sustainable development. The Philippine Banana Growers and Exporters Association is calling for urgent government intervention to save the struggling banana industry, demanding lower tariffs in Japan, a dedicated research hub, and land reform amendments. Banana production in the Philippines has dropped from 9.9 million metric tons in 2019 to just 8.8 million metric tons in 2023. Export revenues have plunged nearly 44% in the same period, falling from $1.95 billion to $1.1 billion. PBJS says Japan's tariffs, 18% from April to September and 8% the rest of the year, are crippling the industry, while competitors like Vietnam and Mexico enjoy zero or preferential rates. The group is urging the Marcos administration to renegotiate better terms under the Japan-Philippines Economic Partnership Agreement. PBJ also warns that the industry is losing ground due to fusarium wilt, which has devastated plantations. They're pushing for a dedicated banana research facility and amendments to land reform laws that prevent growers from consolidating farms for efficient production.
We cannot expand and we cannot produce the required market volume. And that's the reason why we're losing a lot of our markets, not only in Japan, but more so in China and even Korea, which will redound to the benefit of the large and small-scale farmers, because as you well know, the Philippine banana industry is not composed only of big corporations, but also of small growers.
Golden MV Holdings, led by Bilyonaryo Manuel Villar, reported a staggering net income of nearly 1 trillion pesos in 2024, primarily driven by substantial property valuation gains. Earnings of the mass housing and Memorial Park developer soared to 999.72 billion pesos from 1.46 billion in the previous year, largely due to fair value gains on investment properties amounting to 1.33 trillion. This unprecedented profit surge is attributed to the appreciation in value of Golden MV's investment properties, including the acquisition of 366 hectares of prime land within the 3,500-hectare Villar City development. Metro Pacific Tollways Corporation is setting its sights on a public offering in 2026, following strategic efforts to reduce its debt and complete key infrastructure projects. MPTC President and CEO Jose Maria Lim stated that the company plans to go public within the next year, focusing first on debt reduction and the completion of ongoing projects, including the connector road and access roads in Cebu. To address its financial obligations, MPTC plans to raise between 30 to 50 billion pesos through the issuance of new shares via private placement. Major green energy investment gets a boost as ACEN, or AC Energy, secures 34.4 billion financing deal for its 344.5 megawatt Quezon North onshore wind power project. Meanwhile, Citicorp Energy REIT Corporation reported a 2% rise in net income, backed by a strong leasing portfolio. ACEN and its subsidiaries have signed an omnibus load and security agreement with BPI, BDO, and RCBC to partially fund the wind project spanning Quezon and Laguna. The financing deal, facilitated by BDO's Trust Investment Group, supports ACEN's renewable energy expansion. Meanwhile, CREET, the country's largest renewable energy real estate investment trust, posted a 5% revenue jump to 1.9 billion pesos in 2024, with net income rising 2% to 1.4 billion pesos. The company attributes the growth to its stable base lease and higher variable lease revenues, driven by strong property acquisitions and improved contract renewable rates. Meanwhile, the Philippines sent a team to help in rescue operations in quake-hit Myanmar. 2 Air Force planes took off from Manila this morning, carrying the first batch of a 131-person contingent. The government also says it is allocating over 5.7 million pesos to provide assistance to Filipino victims.
Meron po kaming sa amin bilang aeromedical evacuation team, handa po tayong mag-assist doon sa mga Pilipino na magre-repatriate. Hindi lang po doon, kundi pati rin po mag-assist doon din po sa mga kababayan natin.
The judicial process must be respected at all times. That reminder from former President Rodrigo Duterte's lead counsel to supporters who continue to gather in solidarity with him. Nicholas Kaufman asserts, while the Duterte camp welcomes the show of support, politics in this matter should be set aside. Speaking with our colleague, attorney Karen Jimeno in The Hague, Kaufman says, while the jurisdictional issue remains a valid argument, it's still the ICC judges who will eventually decide on Duterte's crimes against humanity case.
Well, it can have a negative impact on the proceedings if, as I said, the media or the supporters turn against the judicial process. There must be absolutely no interference with the independence of the court, with the judges, and for all the parties. Every case at the International Criminal Court is always a highly charged case from a political point of view. There are participants in that process. There's the prosecution, there's the defense, and also there are the victims. The victims' counsels will make their submissions in court. Their right to make those submissions must be respected. So I ask everybody to bear that in mind.
And as former President Duterte's legal team calls for respect for the judicial process, an ICC assistant to counsel is now challenging statements made by Vice President Sara Duterte, who earlier downplayed the number of deaths in her father's controversial drug war. Cristina Conti urges the Vice President to bring her arguments directly to the International Criminal Court and see whether the tribunal will accept her claims. This comes after VP Sara questioned the evidence presented, saying it only referred to 43 counts of murder and that it didn't even reach 50.
And so now it's more than a question of numbers, because when we look at numbers, it feels as if you devalue the humans whose lives have been lost or dehumanized.
The exchange underscores the growing tension surrounding the case and adds to concerns over its wider impact on the country's global standing and legal institutions. Meanwhile, laws should be interpreted based on principles, not political interests. Former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque stresses that claim in an exclusive interview with attorney Karen Jimeno. Roque insists the government's decision to surrender Duterte to the ICC violates its own laws.
Now, also under the Rome Statute, surrender to the court must comply with the requirement that it has to go through a process of extradition, which must be filed before a local court. The local law says we cannot send him to the requesting court unless and until he faces an extradition court.
Roque also blames President Bongbong Marcos for supposedly needing to be away from his family as he seeks protection in other countries. Roque is currently applying for asylum in the Netherlands.
It's very painful. I will never forgive the Marcos family for the damage that they have done to us. Never.
And your kids
And I
miss
regret
you.
the fact that we forgave this family the first time around. They should never be forgiven.
Now, as the word war between Vice President Sara Duterte and the ICC Council unfolds, political tensions at home continue to build with potential impact on policy stability and public trust. The House prosecution panel says it has gathered a strong impeachment case against the vice president. This follows the release of a new list naming alleged recipients of 500 million pesos in confidential funds from the office of the vice president. House Deputy Majority Leader Paga claims the names were apparently lifted from a grocery inventory, raising red flags on the use and documentation of taxpayer money. Some lawmakers argue Vice President Sara should address the allegations directly instead of exchanging barbs with counsel representing victims of the drug war.
This will greatly impact our case as, in fact, the basis for having Article 2 of the impeachment articles will be proved, or we will have a stronger support for Article 2. Para sa mga namimiloso po na nagsasabi kaya nga confidential dapat or fictitious names dapat. Having confidential funds does not automatically allow an official to use fictitious names. The use of fictitious names for confidential funds, usually the real name of those names hiding under the real name of those hiding under fictitious names are usually given in a sealed envelope.
Well, the House panel has begun mock trials in preparation for a possible impeachment, a move that, if gains traction, could influence government focus, legislative agenda, and the broader business environment in the Philippines. That's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business. Only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Always on time.